Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Perhaps. I'm glad you're here. It feels good to be seen, feels good to be heard on this podcast here. And that's what I want to talk about, that need to feel seen in today's episode. So I don't really have that many notes. I have a few things I want to run through and just to get some of my thoughts out there that I've been thinking about lately, because I just put out a book, or I just wrote a book. It's about to come out in June of next year, June 23rd. So go pre-order it now. You don't need a calling, it's called. Link in the description. But writing that book was really hard. It took 2 years, but kind of 3 years. But also a lot of that time was spent me struggling to write anything at all. So it's hard to measure it. And it was, I guess, the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And it's even weird to I hesitate to call it the hardest thing, because it felt like a series of things that just made it hard. Depression, anxiety, self-doubt, like borderline mental health crisis. And it wasn't just writing the book. It was the fact that, like, this is real quick, some good insight for y'all when it comes to writing books and how it's so hard. People say that it's really hard to write a book, and we get that on a level of skill and the execution of writing. But it's also hard because doing a project like that takes that much effort and that much time tends to bring up all the emotional wounds that you've stuffed down your whole life, especially if the book is really personal to you and you're writing about very personal things. And that can make it especially hard. And I think that's what a lot of writers are actually touching on when they talk about how hard it was to write certain things. And so there's that. Also, what I was trying to do to write the book was exceptionally hard. The vision I had for it, I could have made it easier, but I wanted to make it as close to the vision I had, and I'm proud of it, and it's done, and it's awesome. Now I'm saying all this because that struggle that I went through was quite isolating, and it was hard to explain to people what I was going through. So my close friends would say things like, "Hey, how are you doing? How's the book going?" And I would have this demeanor change and say, I'm struggling to write the book. And I said that sentence so many times during the process to so many of my friends, so many times, that eventually I just got so annoyed with myself of repeating that sentence again and again every time someone asked what was going on in my life. It's like, again, same thing as last time you asked me, struggling to write the book. And even that word, the book, became such a heavy, shadowy figure in my mind. The book, capital T, capital B. The book. It was so overwhelming. And so that loneliness that came with that feeling of isolation and struggle to try to get people to understand how hard it was made me struggle to feel like actually seen, to feel understood, to feel heard. And there are times where that made me a bit sad, and I wished other people could understand. Even other writer friends. This time around was harder because this is my second book. The first book, I was able to relate a bit with other writer friends, but this time it was different because what I was writing was different than any other of my other writer friends, partly because of all the things I was trying to connect in the book, also because of how personal it was. Even had some writer friends kind of concerned for me just when I told them what I was going to put in the book, like certain traumatic experiences that I wrote about in the book. And they were like, making sure I understood that, Damon, you don't have to do this. You don't have to write this. You don't have to put this out into the world. But I was like, but I have this vision. Like, it connects with this and this and this, and I feel like it'll help people. And I do feel good and safe and healthy enough to share everything that I did share in the book. And so there's no regrets there at all. And there was no regrets in the beginning either. But all that to say, that made it harder to also relate with other writer friends. And so these are just the thoughts that had been going through my head for a long time of how different and unique this struggle was. I mean, you could hear it in everything I'm over explaining right now in the beginning of this podcast. I'm saying all these different details to try to capture how uniquely hard it was, because I spent a long time feeling like I needed to communicate that to people, and still feeling like it still doesn't capture how uniquely hard it was. But I want to deconstruct that feeling a bit. That's really why I'm explaining all this. Because I think it's interesting, that feeling that, first off, that it's uniquely difficult. Second off, wanting others to see how uniquely difficult it is, and not even wanting the world to see it, at least just some of my closest friends to see how uniquely difficult it was. And thirdly, that feeling that they can't understand it. Those three things I think are very interesting for me to kind of process and think through on the other side of this, as I'm able to see things a bit more clearly. And so I had a little gathering at my house of some of my closest friends after I finished the book. A couple weeks ago, I had some friends over, and it was a good time. We all hung out. We pretty much just sat in a circle in my living room and just talked about random stuff for a while, and laughed about some stuff, told some stories, caught up with each other, talked a little bit about finishing the book, and they're all happy for me, proud of me. And one of my closest friends, who has really been really supportive throughout this whole book writing process, and he also, so he was there, and he also many times throughout writing was intentional about hitting me up, checking in on me, and inviting me places to go hang out. Because there was certain periods where I pushed people away, or it was just hard for me to put the effort into hitting people up and socializing. And so he made sure to keep hitting me up, while other friends, I think, weren't sure when to hit me up or how to hit me up, because they didn't want to bother me, which I don't like that feeling that people feel. I'm sure some of you could relate with this, where someone may say like, I didn't hit you up because I didn't want to bother you. I knew you were busy. And you're thinking like, no, you could have hit me up. Or the classic, even if I couldn't go, it would have been nice to be invited. Like that kind of feeling. But even I think, yeah. So anyway, he was a person who was courageous to hit me up anyway, and I really appreciated that. I really valued that. And there was a few times I tried to explain to him how hard it was to write the book, but I still felt like I couldn't really explain it, and it wasn't even anyone's fault. It wasn't like I just needed the right person to understand. It was that I just couldn't put it into words. And then at this little gathering, celebrating me finishing my book, this friend was congratulating me, telling me he was happy for me. And he said, yeah, I've seen you, man. I've seen you go through this, all the ups and downs, and how hard it was. And congratulations for finishing the book. And in that moment, I was happy to hear that. But at the same time, underneath that, I low-key was thinking, he doesn't know. He didn't really see it. And I was just having flashbacks to times where I was just super isolated and feeling like I was losing my mind, and where I couldn't talk to anyone, and just so angry at myself for not being able to write or struggling to write, and thinking like, no, nobody knows what that was really like. And so, but I said, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And I meant that, but still that there was that little feeling, a little thought of, he doesn't really know what it was like, even though he said he did. But then something happened that made me think differently, that inspired me to think more about this and make this podcast episode about this. I visited San Diego this last weekend, and I talked about that in the very beginning of the last episode, that I was going to visit San Diego for the weekend for this book club, going through my first book, behind me, The God Who Riots. My good friend Taylor was leading a book club with a little group at a church in San Diego. And so I went, hung out with Taylor for the weekend, had a great time. And then on Sunday, we visited the book club, had an awesome conversation. It felt good to hear people talk about the book and tell me what they got out of it. And it was also a cool feeling to make my friend Taylor look kind of cool, because they were excited to meet me, the author of the book they just read. And my friend Taylor was able to say, yeah, this guy that you just read, this author, Damon Garcia, is my friend. Also, Taylor is listed in the acknowledgments of the book. And so that's a cool feeling when I could give other people clout like that with no effort on my part. I'm glad I made him look cool in that circle, and and he could carry that along. And so it was a great conversation. And then at the church service, Taylor introduced me to his friend, who is a professor, but also a pretty young guy, and also working on a book. And Taylor was the one who said, yeah, he's writing a book right now too. And I asked this guy, oh, what's the book about? And I saw his whole demeanor change, just look immediately so overwhelmed and stressed, fidgety, head down, hands all over the place, even covering his face a bit. And I saw a mirror of myself, of how I've been over the last couple of years whenever someone would ask me about the book. And he was like he was struggling to say what it was about. And I know that feeling too, of when you're trying to work on this idea for a book and trying to flesh out these ideas and make them work, and you're not even sure what the final product would be, but you have a vision and you're not sure what you're going to leave in or leave out. And then someone asks you, what's the book about? And so I saw him struggling for like a few seconds, not saying anything. And then I said, you don't have to tell me like the whole thing. You just tell me a real quick thing. I was like sort of regretting asking in the first place. And I think I even said, I've been there. Like, I know what it's like when someone asks you what the book is about, so you don't have to tell me much. And I was saying, I know the energy of explaining the book could go toward writing the book. I get it. Giving him time to think a bit. and then he told me just like in a few words what the book was. And then I was like, cool. And I try to make it clear that I was letting him off the hook, because it was such a stress response that I didn't want him to go through. But in that moment, seeing how that looked and how that felt, I was like, that's me. That was me every time someone would ask me. And then thinking about that more, I realized, hold up, my friend does know what I went through. My friend had said, hey man, I know what I've seen you. I've seen that it's been hard. I'd seen all the ups and downs. And I was thinking, no, he hasn't. But knowing that he saw me looking like that, I immediately knew, like, oh no, he knows. He knew. All my friends knew. Everyone who asked me about how the book was doing, they all knew. They all understood. And they didn't need the details, the stories. They didn't need me crying. They didn't need me making it more dramatic to try to get them to understand. They just needed to see the vibe shift. Like, they just needed to see the difference in the demeanor, and they could tell. I realized, yeah, he knows. Nobody needs all these extra details, and that made me feel a little bit better. And then I just started to think more about these thoughts I was having that people don't understand, and that people need to understand. Actually, also, I'm sure the few times I've said on this podcast that I was having a hard time, I'm sure you all also get it. I don't need to go into a bunch of details. Y'all get it. But what is that feeling that I need to go into more details? I need someone to understand, and nobody understands. Nobody gets me. And I think that really just comes from an insecurity. And then underneath that is a need to feel seen. Like a deep human need to feel seen. Even all the way down to like evolutionary psychology need to feel seen. And you think back, like these ancient hunter-gatherer communities, early humans, if you didn't feel seen, if you didn't feel understood by your community, then that was a threat to survival, because that was a threat to you actually being a part of the community. If you didn't feel seen by your community, you didn't really belong to the community. If you didn't really belong to the community, then you didn't have people to keep you safe. And so I think it goes that deep, that feeling of needing to be seen, and that fear around it, and that insecurity around it. So I think there was this fear within me that people wouldn't understand. Also mixed with that is this feeling, this very ego-driven feeling that if somebody doesn't understand how hard this was for me and why this took me so long to do, then it wouldn't feel worth it. It would only feel worth taking so much longer on this thing than I thought I would if other people can also understand that it was so hard. And I don't want anyone to think that I was lazy or I was just fooling around this whole time. So they need to understand that it was hard. I think there's that ego-driven idea in there too. That people need to know how hard I work so that they don't think negatively of me. It's like, it really is just an avoidance of potential criticism. If I could get everyone to understand how hard it was, then nobody can think I'm lazy. I think that's what that was. I'm like thinking through this in real time, to be honest. And all these thoughts throughout this whole episode are not fully processed. It's just something I'm thinking about literally just right now. So I think there's some of that mixed in there, of course. Also, when it comes to ego. And by the way, ego, what I mean by that is down to the most basic, a sense of self. I don't just mean ego as in thinking you're bigger and better than everybody else. It's just a simple idea that you are an individual self. So that that feeling can be intensified and turn into the more common use of the word ego, thinking you're bigger and better than everyone else. But that's like this greatly intensified, overthought, overgrown sense of self. And I think so. I think that there's that as well, of this desire that others recognize that sense of self and see it the way I see it, in order to try to fix certain insecurities around seeming lazy, seeming like I waste time, seeming like I'm not where I'm supposed to be, that I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, all those little insecurities. And so there's this, that turns into this need for others to give me validation. If I can get others to validate me, then that'll help me validate myself. That's a trap we can get lost in very often. And I see this with creative work in general, a lot of times with a lot of people. I know certain artists that started their whole craft after a breakup, and their plan from the beginning is, I'm gonna get really good at this thing. I'm gonna get really good at videography, or I'm gonna get really good at music. I'm gonna get really good at this other thing, and then I'm gonna become successful at it. I mean, I'm gonna get fans. I'm gonna get money. I'm gonna get some fame, and then one day, my ex will see my name in lights, basically, and regret hurting me. The artist Four Bats. Wait, let me look that up real quick. Four Batz. Really awesome, very young R&B artist. Came out last year, and he put out his very first, his first couple songs blew up immediately because he's just that good. So he put out a few songs and then a little EP, and then, but that EP, let me see, it was called "You Made Me a Star," and the EP was called that in reference to his origin story, which he explained in interviews, of he went through a breakup, then he started taking his music seriously, and then he started blowing up, and then he put out this little EP mixtape. And also those first songs were breakup songs, and like about this girl breaking his heart. And so he's essentially saying, like, you broke my heart, I made music about it, and then I became famous. So you made me a star. And I heard this origin story, and there at the surface, it sounds cool. Like, oh, that's so great. You're able to turn a negative into a positive and become successful. But at a deeper level, I just felt bad. I just felt like, bro, get over her. Go enjoy your life for life's sake, for you, not for her. Why are you making it about her? Why are you making your newfound success and life and fame and fans and craft about her way over there in your past, in your hometown? Like, she's gone. I think she was with another dude also, like, while he's saying all this stuff. And he's putting all this beautiful, huge, powerful energy into her. You made me a star. Look at me now. Do you see me now? Look at who I really am. If only you knew who I really was, what I was really capable of, then you wouldn't have broken my heart. Which is such a young person thing. Like I said, he's very young. I think he was like 18 or something. Wait, let me see. I pulled up his Wikipedia page. He's 21 right now. So yeah, I think he was like, oh yeah, I guess he was 20 when he did that, or 19 or 20 when he did that. But anyway, I also know personally some other friends who had that journey, and then eventually they just found a love for the craft, and they just made it about that instead of trying to impress someone else. And I've also seen some people kind of lose steam for the craft and just stop entirely. And I think it's because that steam of trying to impress someone that broke your heart, trying to get them to see you, dissolves eventually. And I think there's also a lot of people who try to become really successful hoping that it would fix that insecurity, feeling like people didn't value them before, people didn't appreciate them, people didn't really see what they're capable of. And then if I get really successful and famous, then they'll see, or that classic, like, this is for the teachers who told me I wouldn't amount to nothing. that Biggie lyric at the beginning of Juicy, I think. That's always so funny. That's the classic line of, because many people have said that, like, the teachers had told me I wouldn't be shit. And then nowadays people, it's like a joke that how many times that line has been repeated by different artists. And it's funny to even imagine, like, who are these teachers telling little kids they're not going to be shit? It's so funny to imagine that. But yeah, I guess those teachers exist, and people have those stories of, this is for my teacher who didn't believe in me, who told me I wouldn't amount to nothing. I'm going to show them. Then they'll see. And I think, again, that's all deeply rooted in this insecurity and this fear of not being seen. And it feels like if I can just accomplish this and this and this and this, if I could get a whole bunch of people to love me and appreciate me, then I could show them who I really am. Then I could feel seen. And then that fear and insecurity inside me about not being seen will be fixed. And that is the big lie. And I think that's why you see so many rich and famous people struggle so much, because they do all this work to try to fix that within them, and then it doesn't work. And then they don't know what to do with themselves. They either work harder and then try to become bigger and bigger and bigger, hoping maybe I just need to become even more successful and then it'll fix me. Or they just turn to a life of self-destruction through hard drugs and other self-destructive behaviors, and hoping that'll fix it. Because I think a lot of people end up in a place where they find out, oh, this wasn't fixed. What do I do now? And I think there's a lot of artists who are working really hard, or even not even just artists, people working hard in general. Because people will get into different career fields with this kind of desire as well, and just work really hard, hoping that it'll fix them. When the truth is, you can just work on that fear and insecurity now, instead of hoping to fix it later when you become successful, or when you finally get that job, when you finally get that degree, when you finally get that award, when you finally get a certain amount of money or whatever. It's like, first off, acknowledge that's not going to fix it. Second off, you could just work on that now. Or like right now. And it's so much easier to just go through the process of working on it now, instead of working so hard thinking that success will fix it. And so I think, that's something we all have to work through. And it's not a quick fix. No quick fixes. It's a whole long process of deconstructing those insecurities and fears, understanding them, understanding yourself, understanding where those things came from, understanding maybe some of the traumas that birthed some of those fears, understanding how some of those things are just a human part of you, natural part of you, understanding how you actually should have validation. How much validation do you actually need? How much you don't actually need? And being able to trust yourself, love yourself, care for yourself, believe in yourself without the need for validation all the time. And so it's a whole process. I actually have a chapter in the book that's coming out next year that gets into a bit of this, about this validation seeking behavior and some of my artist friends and what I've seen through that. And there was a part that was in there that I ended up cutting out, but I'll say in this podcast episode that relates to some of these stories I've been sharing. I grew up evangelical, but then went into ministry when I was like 18, 19. Thought I was going to be a pastor. Thought God called me to be a pastor, and was in a ministry program and thought I was going to get a pastoral license through the denomination I was in. I was doing youth and young adults ministry. I finished that ministry program, doing a little bit of Bible college. And then in 2017, in the middle of my pastoral licensing process, I decided to leave because my theology had evolved long before that, but I was spending a lot of time thinking I could change things from the inside until I realized I couldn't. And then I left in 2017, lost so much community, lost so many friends and connections. It was really hard. But I had a lot of my artist friends that I was able to fall back on, which is great. And then I started making YouTube videos where I could finally speak honestly about what I believe. And I started building this YouTube channel and other social media stuff, trying to teach good messages, but also like really sharing what I believe about spirituality, theology, politics. And in the beginning of that, when people first started, because it took a while for people to actually start watching the videos, but when people did start, and my subscriber count slowly started rising from like 10, 20, 30, 40, 60, 80, 100. I remember 100 was a big deal, and 200. And then it was around 200 that it started to really like grow more. And then I remember thinking, this is awesome that I've found this new path that feels like I'm back on a path that since I had fell off that other one, and now I could find some purpose again in my life and find also a new community of people to speak to, since I had lost that when I had left the evangelical church and ministry and all that stuff. And this is what I wanted to say. I remember thinking, I've never shared this. And I was going to share it in the book, but I decided to cut it. And I only cut it just to try to keep things clear and concise in the book and not go on too many tangents. And I felt like I already explained it good enough in the book. But anyway, I remember thinking, if my subscriber count could pass the number of congregation members at my old church, then I'll really feel good, or I'll really feel like this is worth it. I don't know. I don't think I had a word for it. I just knew it would feel good, but I think what I was really feeling was like, then it would all be worth it, basically. And really just needed to pass like 400, which is funny looking back at now, how big that seemed at the time. But it was, I was convinced that like that's all I need to do. And it was also to avoid feeling like I made any mistakes, to avoid feeling like I went down the wrong path. Like if this ends up being more successful, if I end up having more people in this little online community I'm building than the one I left, then I'll for sure know I didn't take the wrong path. And it's so funny, but I mean, I never spoke that out loud, but it was just in my head. And it meant so much to me. And then I passed. And honestly, I remember having those feelings of like, oh, I wish I could pass this. But I do not remember when it actually passed that number at all. So it was, I don't even think there was a moment or I acknowledged it or celebrated it personally. And I think the reason I don't remember it is because it actually didn't fix anything. The truth was I needed to go through this necessary grieving process of losing that community and go deep and solve that issue or work through that issue, instead of thinking, well, if I could just become more successful on a new path, then that'll fix the sadness I have about leaving an old path. And I feel like some of you out there can relate if you actually think about your life. I think a lot of people have ended up in very similar situations. Even with relationships, I think we end up like that, where we leave a relationship and we may even have some doubts about leaving that relationship. And then it feels like, if I could just find someone that's better than that other person, or if this relationship could last a month longer than the other one did, or if I could just do this or that with this person, then it'll really feel like I'm over that other person, or it'll really feel like I've made the right choice in breaking up with that other person. Or we do that with certain jobs. If I could just make this amount of money at this new job, then I'll feel good and much better about losing that other job where I made that amount of money. And I think we all fit. And again, it's similar to what I was saying earlier. It actually doesn't fix those insecurities. It's like a separate issue that you could just work on now. You know what I mean? And I think so much of our behavior is based on looking for that need for validation. I think even a lot of political discourse we see these days is based on so many people starving to feel seen. I think of all these internet debates and comment sections where people will leave these long, angry comments on strangers' posts. And nowadays, when I see those comments, sometimes on my posts, sometimes on other people's posts, I feel like what's really underneath those extremely long posts or extremely long comments is just someone crying out, please see me. Please, someone, I'm so lonely. Someone, please see me. Even these internet trolls who will spend all day just leaving hateful comments on people's posts or on popular posts feels the same way. Like someone just is so lonely, doesn't feel seen, and this is as good as they can do, they feel like this is all I have, is leaving these cyberbullying people and hoping they see it, rage baiting people and hoping they comment back something to get in an argument with me, and then I'll feel like I really exist. I feel like that's what's underneath it, even if they don't realize it. I think that's what's underneath it. And I think that's also why there's a lot of you out there who may see that type of internet engagement and the way that people leave these long old comments, or cyberbully people, or argue with people and are hateful on the internet. And you may think like, how are people even doing this? How does one even think to do that? Or even commenting on a stranger's post at all. And when I say stranger, I mean someone you're not even following. It just pops up in your feed and you don't know who they are at all, and you don't plan on following them, and then you leave this critical comment and you're thinking like, what? How does that type of person even exist? And I think the reason that confusion comes from the fact that you don't have as much of a need for validation. I think that's why you're confused. about these people that you see online that engage in ways that you would never. I think it's just because you feel a little bit better about yourself. So you don't feel the need to be that desperate and looking for validation. And again, I don't mean like, yeah, I mean, you get what I mean. Commenting on people that you don't even know. Because I'm not talking about, I don't want anyone to think that if you're leaving a YouTube comment on this video and you're following me, I'm not talking about you. Y'all know me. Y'all are following me. But people, I'm talking about those drive-by comments on you're scrolling and then you see something that annoys you and then you comment something mean toward them and then dip out and then planning to never see them again. Anyway, and I think I'm also growing a lot around in that area of that validation seeking, not needing it as much. And I've been realizing lately, I think that also has changed my motivation around making stuff on the internet, posting on the internet, making videos, writing, even writing books. In some ways, I think that need to be seen has been filled. Has been filled all the way up for a while. Like I put out a book, a lot of people read it. A lot of people liked it. People hated it. I've had some videos go semi-viral. Bunch of people see, a bunch of people comment. Like, I know what that feels like. And so that need to feel seen, I feel like has decreased because of that. And then, I mean, the need to feel seen in certain ways. And I mean, the need to feel seen by the world. I think that's what I mean. Because I think that's different than the need to feel seen by friends, which is more what I was talking about in the beginning. But that need to feel seen by the world, I think, was more in there toward the beginning of me putting stuff on the internet and has slowly gone down. But I think it's also slowly gone down just because of my own personal growth and healing of all my various issues. And when that goes down, you have to find a new motivation for posting stuff on the internet. So these days, when I'm posting stuff on the internet, I no longer really have this feeling of needing to be understood by strangers or seen or liked or whatever by strangers. And like I said, partly because I think I've gotten a fill of it already. And also partly because I'm better about that around my validation seeking these days. And so when that dissolves, you have to find new motivation. And that's what I've been thinking about a lot over, I think I've been thinking about it a lot over the last few years, more over the last couple years, but thinking about it more clearly over the last few months of thinking, okay, what am I actually doing? What am I actually doing here? Why am I actually here? And I think the thing I've been coming back to over the last few months is, first of all, I like talking. I like talking. It feels good talking. There's something about talking and sharing things, communicating ideas around things that I'm passionate about and care about and think will help people is something that makes me feel alive, more passionate and happy and joyful. And so that's great. And beyond that, I think I have something worth saying, and I think it helps people. And so I want to be able to keep coming on here on this podcast, writing articles, making posts on the internet, and writing books and doing talks, visiting book clubs like I did in San Diego. I want to keep doing that because I think I have something worth saying and I like helping people. And I think what I say helps people, helps them think differently. But more specifically, I think what I'm really passionate about right now, if I want to put it in clear language, specific language, is that I care about helping people stretch their imagination. And so that's why I like talking about a bunch of things and connecting them all together. Stuff in culture, stuff in politics, stuff in art, movies, books, theology, spirituality, society, and putting it all together. And that was part of the inspiration for even making this podcast, perhaps, is so that I could be a little bit more free form in the things we connect here. In order to help people stretch their imaginations, help people develop a radical imagination, and more specifically around spirituality and politics and stuff. So that's been my motivation lately, and that'll change. That changes. This stuff changes all the time. We're in a constant state of becoming, constant state of change. Everything is always changing. We're always growing, learning, evolving. That's just where I'm at right now, today. And I feel in some ways it feels good that I don't have as much of a need for validation from the world, but in other ways it kind of sucks because the motivation sometimes is harder now to try to drum up. Because when you have that desperation, people need to see me. I need to be seen in order to be a valuable human being. It's a little easier to get out the camera, or you know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's interesting. Again, like I said earlier, these are all kind of just me processing in real time, different thoughts, very all over the place, thinking in real time. Nothing really solid. But I just wanted to share a bit of those thoughts with you as I'm thinking through them about this need to feel seen and how that functions in different ways. And I want you to think about your own life, about the ways that you feel the need to be seen, some of your fears around it, some of your own insecurities, how that has informed your behavior over the years, how that's informed some of your choices, your career choices, education choices, and how it's worked out for you. I'm sure in some ways you're happy that validation seeking ended up leading you toward building certain skills, joining certain communities, learning new things because you were looking for validation, but you ended up getting some benefits along the way. And I'm sure there are also times where following that validation seeking ended up not so good. But that's okay too. Like I said, we're always learning and growing, figuring everything out in real time. Nobody knows what they're supposed to do, ever. And if it ever looks like somebody knows what they're supposed to do, they're either pretending or they're so tuned in and accepting that they don't know what they're supposed to do, that it looks like they know what they're supposed to do, but really they're just going with the flow. And that's what I'm trying to become. I think there's just somebody going with the flow. Because I'm never gonna reach a point where I know what I'm supposed to do. Oh my gosh, so dramatic, that idea. Anyway, but yeah, there's some thoughts about feeling seen. Thank you for listening. Go pre-order that book, by the way. You don't need a calling. I worked really hard on it, all right? So that means you have to buy it. So that means you have to pre-order it right now so I could feel seen. Okay? No, I'm just joking, of course, but it would be great if you pre-order it. And I'll see you next week on the next podcast. See you later. Bye-bye.